Welcome to the Sewer Wealth Podcast, where we bring you the timeless wisdom of the world's greatest business and wealth-building books. In each episode, we break down proven strategies from legendary minds, so you can apply them to your own journey toward financial freedom and success. So, get ready to unlock the secrets of success, one book at a time.
Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. You know, we love to take these deep dives into really powerful books, and this one is no different. We're revisiting As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, but this time with a bit of a twist.
A twist,
yeah. So remember, in episode 3 of the Sure Wealth podcast, we touched on this book and really kind of dug into, you know, how it applies to our health and well-being. But today we're taking it a step further, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and really looking at how these same principles can help us, you know, build real wealth, which I know is something that a lot of our listeners are really striving for.
Yeah, for sure.
So our mission today is to really kind of unpack, you know, that core connection Allen draws between thought patterns and the ability to achieve, you know, financial success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to go a bit deeper than just a general overview of the book and really try to pull out those actionable takeaways that you can apply directly to your financial life.
Okay, so let's dive right in. You know, one of the first things that really kind of jumps out at you when you read Allen's work is this idea that having a purpose, like a clear purpose, is absolutely essential.
Yeah.
He's very direct about it. He says, until thought is linked with purpose, there is no intelligent accomplishment. Pretty powerful statement, right?
It is. It is. You can't really argue with that, right? I mean, it's like without a clear financial goal, your attention is just, it's reactive. You're chasing trends. You might be succumbing to impulsive spending driven by worry or FOMO or who knows what else.
Right.
Allen's really highlighting how this lack of internal direction leaves you vulnerable to these external forces.
Yeah.
And, you know, those rarely align with long-term wealth creation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like, you know, he uses that image of a bark of thought drifting aimlessly on the ocean of life, right? It's not just about like not knowing where you're going. It's about being totally at the mercy of every current and every wind that comes along.
Yeah. I think that image really sticks with you, doesn't it? Like a boat without an anchor just being tossed around.
Yeah. And he goes on to say, you know, people without this kind of central purpose, they become, you know, they really kind of start to get bogged down by these petty worries, fears, troubles, and self-pityings.
Yeah.
It's not just, you know, feeling a little lost. He's suggesting there's a direct link between that lack of purpose and, you know, succumbing to these negative emotional states.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? He connects these seemingly minor negative states, right? Petty worries.
Right.
Fears, troubles, self-pity, to some pretty significant consequences.
Yeah.
He calls them indications of weakness, which inevitably lead to, you know, failure, unhappiness, and loss.
Right.
So it's not just like, oh, I'm a little worried, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, no, this is actually eroding your mental and emotional resilience, which makes it that much harder to navigate the challenges that are inherent in building wealth. It's like, it's almost like he suggests that undirected mental energy can be just as damaging as actively pursuing, you know, negative actions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, he really drives that point home when he says, weakness cannot persist in a power-evolving universe. Like, there's this natural principle at play, right?
Right.
Where focused energy and intention, they're inherently more sustainable.
Absolutely.
They lead to progress, while a lack of direction, you know, it can't hold up in the long run.
It's a dynamic system, right? It's not just about being static. It's that directed effort kind of compounds and builds on itself.
Right.
So how do we get out of this state of just drifting and vulnerability? What does Allen propose we do?
Well, he says pretty clearly, you know, a man should conceive of a legitimate purpose in his heart and set out to accomplish it. And that purpose, it becomes the centralizing point of their thoughts. It's like, you know, I always think about it like setting your financial compass. You're giving that ship of thought an actual destination.
And it's so interesting that he acknowledges like the personal nature of this purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Like it can be a spiritual ideal or maybe a worldly object, depending on where someone is on their journey.
Right.
So for our listeners who are focused on building wealth, you know, that worldly object could absolutely be their specific financial aspirations, whether it's achieving a certain level of investment income or, you know, building a business, owning a business, or securing their family's future, whatever it is. But the crucial next step, as Allen emphasizes, is to then really steadily focus his thought forces upon the object which he has set before him.
Right.
It's not enough to just have the goal. It's about actively and consistently directing your mental energy towards it.
Right.
He even calls making that purpose your supreme duty, highlighting the level of unwavering commitment that's required.
It's so true. And he specifically warns against letting your thoughts just kind of get, scattered by ephemeral fancies, longings, and imaginings. It's about developing that mental discipline to stay on course and, not get lured by every, shiny object that pops up.
Yeah, resist those distractions. Don't get sidetracked from your long-term objectives.
Yeah.
And, he presents this focused dedication as, the royal road to self-control and true concentration of thought. It's like building a mental muscle, right?
Right.
The more you practice consciously directing your thoughts, the stronger your ability to focus becomes.
And what I really like is how Alan addresses setbacks. He acknowledges that people necessarily must fail at times, especially when they're first starting out.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to fail until you kind of overcome those weaknesses.
Sure.
But he reframes those failures not as like the end of the world, but as opportunities to learn and to grow. He says even in failure, the strength of character gained will be the true measure of his true success.
It's a huge mindset shift, right? Instead of seeing failure as the end amassed, it becomes this marker of your resilience, your growth.
Exactly. And it's not just about, okay, I failed, so now I'm stronger. He says that gained strength is not the end of the road.
Right.
It becomes a new starting point for future power and triumph.
Right.
So even those moments where it feels like you're moving backward can actually be building the foundation for, these huge breakthroughs later on.
Absolutely. And I think that's really encouraging for people who are just starting out on their wealth building journey.
Yeah. What about the people who, they're listening to this and they're thinking, okay, setting some grand, overarching purpose. That feels a little daunting right now.
Yeah.
Does Alan address that at all?
Yeah, he does. He does. For those who are not prepared for the apprehension of a great purpose, he offers a more, immediate and practical approach.
Okay.
He says, focus your thoughts intently on the faultless performance of their duty, no matter how insignificant their task may appear.
Oh, I like that. So it's like, if you can't quite visualize that whole financial empire you want to build, just focus on kind of really excelling at your job right now.
Right.
Or being meticulous about tracking your expenses, or really doing your due diligence on your next investment. It's like bringing that same level of focus to the smaller, immediate steps.
Exactly. And what's great about that is you're essentially training your mind for larger undertakings. It's like a pilot practicing on a simulator before flying a real plane.
Yeah.
You're building those fundamental skills and that mental acuity.
Right.
And Alan says that only in this way, by focusing on those smaller tasks, can the thoughts be gathered and focused, and resolution and energy be developed.
I see.
And once you have that resolution and that energy developed through consistent effort on the smaller tasks, he says, there is nothing which may not be accomplished.
Oh, wow.
It's a gradual process, but it's powerful.
That's really encouraging. And then he goes on to use this really relatable analogy to explain how we can overcome mental weakness, which I think is so helpful.
Yeah.
He compares it to, physical weakness.
Oh, yeah.
So if someone is physically weak, they can become strong through, careful and patient training. And he says the same principle applies to our thoughts.
Yeah, it's that initial self-awareness that's key. Alan says the weakest soul, knowing its own weakness and believing this truth that strength can only be developed by effort and practice, will, thus believing, at once begin to exert itself.
Right.
So that first step is acknowledging where you are and believing in your capacity to change.
Right.
That's absolutely crucial for any kind of progress, whether it's physical fitness or financial acumen.
Right.
And it's not an overnight transformation.
Right.
It's about consistently adding effort to effort, patience to patience, and strength to strength. And eventually you become, divinely strong in your mental fortitude. It's like the power of compounding, but applied to your mindset and your ability to persevere in your financial endeavors.
I love that. So essentially, Alan is saying that to put away aimlessness and weakness and to begin to think with purpose is to enter the ranks of those strong ones.
That's exact.
And he actually describes, what these individuals who operate with this kind of mental discipline are like.
Yeah.
It's a pretty inspiring picture. He says they only recognize failure as one of the pathways to attainment, who make all conditions serve them, and who think strongly, attempt fearlessly, and accomplish masterfully It's like, they see obstacles as just temporary detours,
Yeah. They're not going to let anything stop them.
They have this confidence and this proactive attitude.
Yeah, and once you have that purpose clearly conceived, you have to create that mental pathway to achieving it.
Oh, okay.
Alan says that a man should mentally mark out a straight pathway to its achievement, looking neither to the right nor to the left. It's about unwavering focus, keeping your eyes on the prize, so to speak.
Yeah, and he really cautions against letting doubts and fears creep into that pathway. He calls them disintegrating elements that disrupt that straight line of effort.
Right.
And ultimately make it crooked, ineffectual, useless. It's like having a clear financial plan, but then constantly second-guessing yourself, letting those anxieties paralyze you.
It's self-sabotage.
Exactly.
And Alan is very clear when he says that thoughts of doubt and fear never accomplished anything and never can.
Wow.
When those negative emotions take hold, it's like your purpose, your energy, your drive to act, it all just evaporates.
And that brings us to the power of belief.
Yeah.
Right. Alan says, the will to do springs from the knowledge that we can do. It's that internal conviction that you can actually achieve those financial goals that fuels the necessary action.
And it's doubt and fear that are the enemies of that knowledge.
Right.
Because they erode that belief in our capabilities.
Yeah.
Alan says that anyone who encourages them, who does not slay them, thwarts himself at every step.
It's like we're our own worst enemies sometimes.
Absolutely.
But then he says something so empowering. He says, he who has conquered doubt and fear has conquered failure.
I love that.
It's a bold statement, but it really highlights how important it is to cultivate that confident, resilient mindset when it comes to your finances.
He describes the thoughts of someone who has overcome doubt and fear as being allied with power. They can face those financial difficulties with courage and navigate them with wisdom. Their purposes are seasonably planted and yield lasting results, rather than just those fleeting gains.
And he brings it all together with such a powerful conclusion. He says, thought allied fearlessly to purpose becomes creative force.
It's like that magic formula.
Yeah.
It's when your focused intention combines with a resolute lack of fear that you can truly unlock your potential.
And manifest those goals.
Exactly. And I think that applies so directly to building lasting wealth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what I find so profound is the transformation that Alan describes. He says that understanding and actually applying this principle shifts a person from being a mere bundle of wavering thoughts and fluctuating sensations into a conscious and intelligent wielder of his mental powers.
You go from being reactive to proactive.
Exactly.
You're taking control.
It's about taking control of your inner world to shape your outer financial reality.
And that's really what this deep dive is all about, right?
Yeah.
Empowering you to do just that.
So to kind of recap, our deep dive into As a Man Thinketh, through this lens of building wealth, Alan really lays out this compelling argument for why having a clear purpose to direct our thoughts is so essential.
Yeah.
Right? Without it, we're just adrift. We're susceptible to negativity, and ultimately we're just hindering our own progress.
Right.
He stresses the importance of consciously defining and consistently focusing on a legitimate purpose, whether it's this big vision or a series of smaller, more immediate goals. And then he says, view those setbacks as valuable opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
And for those who feel a little overwhelmed by setting a really big goal, focusing on excellence in your present duties is a powerful way to build that mental strength.
Exactly.
Overcoming both mental and physical weakness requires consistent effort and a fundamental belief in our capacity to grow.
Absolutely.
And by choosing purposeful thinking over aimlessness, we join the race of those who see obstacles as stepping stones.
You got it.
Right. And then crucially, Alan emphasizes the need to mentally chart that clear path to our goals and actively exclude, those destructive forces of doubt and fear.
Right.
Because the drive to achieve comes from the belief that we can actually do it.
Yeah.
And conquering those doubts and fears is essentially conquering failure itself.
That's so powerful.
Right. And ultimately, he concludes that when our focused thought aligns fearlessly with our purpose, it unleashes this potent creative force, transforming us into, the architects of our own success.
And that's just the first layer.
Yeah.
Right? Understanding how our inner world shapes our external achievement.
Oh, yeah. And in our next deep dive, we're going to continue this conversation.
Oh, good.
We're going to delve even deeper into what As a Man Thinketh reveals about, the thought factor in achievement, as we previewed on the Share Wealth podcast. So definitely stay tuned for that.
I'm looking forward to it. And, while we're on the topic of applying these principles, I think it would be valuable for our listeners to really reflect on what we've discussed today.
Yeah.
And ask themselves, what is one specific area of my financial life? Maybe it's investing. Maybe it's my career. Maybe it's managing my spending. But where could that create intentionally aligning my thoughts with a crystal clear purpose and actively confronting any underlying doubts or fears? Where could that create the most significant positive impact on my journey toward building lasting wealth?
It's a great question, and one that I think is really worth giving some serious thought to.
Absolutely.
So until our next deep dive, goodbye for now.